during this process, as I mentioned, there are distortions. And what we need are appropriate checks and balances to sort of minimize the distortions. So in that sense, of course, when I the use of the word administration, I'm just going to define it as sort of governance, and of course politics, a lot of the external interface that flows through politics. So that's what we would like to explore in this session. I just want to leave, a couple of examples that come to my mind. In fact, I'm not sure if the gentleman from IFC is here in the audience. I know that our own promoters of the Hyderabad airport who went to Male, the framework for the airport bringing in PPP in Male was actually by the IFC. And one of the important things the IFC had said is that an airport development charge of $25 per passenger should be levied so that the viability of the project is ensured, and that was part of the contract. Unfortunately, the politics came in a big way because Male is sort of unstable in its the political leadership. And while the then president and the relevant ministers signed into it, the parliament had all the time been objecting to it. Now that was a clear case of a big political risk. Nevertheless, GMR went into it, and so the new government did not give the authorization for the $25 to be charged because there was a lot of opposition to it. So GMR would not pay whatever money they had bid for. They had bid for a certain payment, so they would deduct the equivalent of the $25 per person charge and say that until the matter is resolved, this is what we can afford to pay. And all that created so much that finally last year in December, using more sovereign rights, the government of Maldives asked GMR to move out. And of course, while the government has subsequently changed and the new president seems a little more sort of open, but he has still clearly said that there is just too much opposition to bringing in an external player. And he says, in fact, we may not have a PPP, we will just have maybe the MACL, that's the equivalent of our Airports Authority of India, I think Maldives Airport Company Limited or whatever. So they will continue to run the airport, while they said we will welcome GMR to come and invest in many of our other sectors, tourism, hotel, resorts, shopping malls, whatever else if they wish to. But, I'm not sure that airport can be opened up. It's a very classic case of, an international, political risk. Of course, in a recent example where political risk played out in India, and I'm sure it plays out in most PPPs, is the Yamuna Expressway, where funnily it was the Mayawati government that first proposed the project and they got it going. Then the party lost power, then came the Mulayam Singh Yadav government, and the first thing they did is they said we're going to have committee after committee to see what all wrong they did in terms of the conceptualization of the project. Funnily, none of the committees could find anything, and in fact one committee resigned, another committee actually gave a clean chit and said we should get on with the project. So finally Mulayam Singh's government sort of rather with not full heart said, okay, let's get on with the project. And the project got a big boost. The project went on. Of course, unfortunately, the project did not get completed before Mayawati again lost power, and it was Akhilesh who had the privilege of opening the Yamuna Expressway when it first started. But the state political risk was a very important one that has played up there, and that's only one aspect. It has many things in terms of the land which has got bundled with the project. The fact that the toll rates are not governed by any formula. All the national highway projects today are governed by formula, but this one is not governed by formula, and it makes it completely vulnerable between the promoter and the UP government to sort of negotiate, Of course, today the rates are already set so high that the traffic is not coming there, so it would not be an issue whether they would increase the toll rates, and the promoter is of course always free to charge lower than the maximum toll rate that has been fixed, which they have not yet sort of ventured to do. But you know, that's the kind of issues out there. The Bangalore-Mysore Expressway is tottering. It was one of the first PPP projects in the country to have been conceptualized before the formal concept of PPPs came into the country. And till date, that project has not seen the completion. It is partially done. You know, government after government, they sort of shoot down the other government's approach towards the project. And so politics plays a big role in this whole aspect. So anyway, with that, I just want to sequence the four presentations because I think there is a natural sort of build-up that is possible. We will first look at sort of what I think the papers mean to say. We'll start with the governance related to a PPP. So I would first ask more specifically the control system framework paper by Professor Suresh Moni. Second, we will sort of go up and look at governance of PPPs, where of course a media critique is being offered by Dharmesh. Then we will go on to the politics of PPP by Varun, and finally we look at sort of role of legislation by Ms. Sujana. So that's the sequence we will follow, and let's see, you know, it gets us to a broader and broader perspective. Okay, so with that, let me hand over to Professor Suresh Moni, and I would request, I think, each of the speakers to sort of very briefly introduce themselves before the, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Raghuram. Dr. Raghuram, fellow panelists, delegates to the seminar, it's a pleasure for me to be presenting this paper. While I say it's a privilege for me to be presenting a paper where Dr. Raghuram is the chairman, let me also confess, maybe I'm a bit nervous because he's such a doyen in this field. He's such an eminent authority that you know, I'm keeping my fingers crossed on how this presentation goes. To introduce myself, I am Suresh Mani. I head the Narsi Monji Institute of Management Studies at Bangalore. We have a campus where we offer MBA programs. Earlier on, I was with SP Jain Institute of Management and Research in Bombay. And before that, for a period of about 35 years, I was in industry. I was into projects, I was into corporate finance and so on. So that's a brief introduction about myself. Now, just a little background about this paper. You know, all of us assembled in this room are, I think, like PPPs in some way or the other. I hope so. At least that's why we have come to this seminar. And we have been talking the morning also, we heard with the private aspect of the PPPs, the public aspects of the PPPs. And the third aspect, which Mr. Ranjan very eloquently pointed out, the partnership is what seems to be not there. Or the partnership, there's a lot of inadequacies in the partnership. So my paper really is focusing a little bit on how to get the partnerships going. You know, how do you really make it a public-private partnership? And as an academician, we have a concept called management control systems. And so I'm trying to bring in the management control systems aspect into this private-public partnership. So the focus or the theme, the title is, how do you employ management control systems to enhance productivity and profitability of PPPs? So what we are proposing is, see, the word management control systems itself is, the control system is, it's a behavioral approach. The whole purpose of having control system is to induce the right behavior, to induce appropriate behavior in all the stakeholders. So that is the primary reason why we should have appropriate management control systems. You have incentives, you have penalties, you have liquidated clauses. All these are really part of control system in any organization. Now, if you look at PPPs, you know, the PPPs have started, it was started with great fanfare in the mid-90s. I think mid-90s to 2000 did not make much of a progress. But I think after 2000, the progress was rapid. Around 2003, 4, 5, 6, the progress was very rapid, especially with the development of the road sector. But again, post-2009 or post-2008, the development has slowed down, and you know, the projects are not taking off, or when they take off, there's an interminable delay, and so on. Now, McKinsey, on behalf of the Government of India, had conducted a study, and they said, if this is the way in which private-public partnerships are going to progress, in the 8 or 9 year period between 2008 and 2017, they projected a loss at about $200 billion to the Government of India, which is about 6,750 rupees per capita. And they also said that it will probably, about 30 to 35 million jobs could have been created if the PPPs had gone as per schedule. That will not take place. The reduction in unemployment could have been another 5 to 6%. That would not take place. And people being lifted above the poverty line could have been increased by another 3 to 4%. That would not take place. So, it means that if we are not getting our act together, I think the country is in for a huge socio-economic loss. And they said, what are the reasons for why PPPs are languishing or the progress is slow? And they divided that into five broad categories. They said the delays in the tendering stage are causing about $100 billion loss. The suboptimal design and engineering is causing about $20 billion loss. The financing constraints and the delay in the financial closure is about $20 billion loss. Procurement inefficiencies about $10 billion, and poor construction practices about $50 billion. And so you'll find the delays in the tendering stage is of about 50%, and the poor construction practices about 25%. Between them, they constitute about 75% of the socio-economic loss in this country. Now, what are the contributory factors? The contributory factors, they said, was the inadequate viability assessment. So every project passes through a pre-feasibility stage, a detailed project stage, detailed project report stage, but yet with all those stages, the quality of the reports leaves a lot to be desired. So the viability assessment is not proper. Pre-tendering process, you have a 24 to 36 weeks delay in the DPR, about 24 to 36 weeks delay in the approvals. Concession agreement about 12 to 18 weeks delay, even after the LOI has been given, and other delays another about 6 months. A lot of projects get delayed because of land acquisition, which is about 70%. 70% of the delays is really because of land acquisition. Now, if you look at it, so which means because of these delays, we require control systems. Now, when you go back into academia, there were two people who had defined what control systems were. We had Henri Fayol, who was in a way, one of the fathers of management along with Frederick Taylor. And he, in 1949, had defined controls as consisting of whether everything occurs in conformity with the plan adopted, the instructions issued, and the principles established. Now, Peter Drucker, who is the real father of modern management, has said that management control systems exist within a human situation and is volitional, requiring the system to motivate managers. So we need control systems to really motivate managers, the various stakeholders involved. Here it's just not managers in an organization. You have various stakeholders from the private sector, from the public sector, from the consultants, from the engineering contractors, from the banks and financial institutions. So people in all these, amongst all these stakeholders have to be sort of enthused, motivated, what have you. So our paper is really to see whether we can have some sort of a framework in order to motivate the various stakeholders involved. So we have divided into two parts. One is a qualitative approach and one is a quantitative approach. Now, in a qualitative approach, what we want to really do is, see, any control system, a system has got an input, it's got a process, it's got an output. And in a control system, you have certain benchmarks or standards against which you compare. And depending upon your comparison, you take a corrective action. So in a control system, you can take preventive action, you can take corrective action. So at each stage, so what we have tried to do is the various reasons for delay, starting from the DPR preparation, from the land acquisition, the concession agreement, the execution of concession agreement, all this, we have tried to analyze them into what are the inputs at each stage, what are the output, what are the process, and what are the key factors which will help them to be done in a more streamlined or controlled manner. Now, if you look at DPR preparation, one of the facts we mentioned was that the quality of DPRs is poor. So what should we do? So the key influencing factor is that you should have great consultants or good consultants who can prepare DPR. So what we have said is that you must look at the how part. The how part, we should have the ministry, which really, in fact, ministry is shortlisting consultants. But how should they go about it? they should do a scoring. They should do a scoring of the consultants who prepare DPR on various factors, including the quality, the time in which they do, the accuracy of the estimates, the comprehensiveness with which the designs, the basic designs are made, so on and so forth. And they can, this scoring pattern, based on this scores, the results can be published in a transparent manner on the site. You know, we took this cue from eBay. You know, you have this eBay, which is the model. One of the reasons for success for eBay was that transparency in which they rate every vendor who sells their goods on eBay. And this is updated on a day-to-day basis. And that's where they get the trust of the people. So once you have transparency, I think you can get trust. And once it is published, I think people will ensure that they do their job properly. So for DPR preparation, what we are saying is that the knowledge of the ministry, which is the Secretariat of Infrastructure, PPP infrastructure, should publish the transparent system for evaluating the consultants. Then we have after that, the SPV formation, of course, is not much of a problem. That happens. We have attaining financial closure. Attaining financial closure, the government has already given a time period of about 180 days, which they have extended to 120 days. But here again, one should rate the banks and the financial institutions. The banks and the financial institutions have to be rated, and their scores have to be put on the site. Then we have the construction, the land acquisition. Now, land acquisition, how do you motivate people? I think this actually, the work really rests or devolves on the government. So government might actually give motivation in terms of financial or non-financial incentives to those officials who are going after the land parcels in order to expedite how the land parcels can be obtained and the acquisition can be done properly. Concession agreement. Now, concession agreement, again, things have to be done parallel. The financial closure, the land acquisition, and the execution of the agreement have to be done in parallel. And all this has to be put on the site. Now, with these, this is the qualitative part. The contracting, again, we said one of the reasons was that poor construction practices. Lean management is not being adopted by our contractors. So again, the scoring system of contractors who adopt lean management, the quality construction, etc., should be put on site. So all this is available not only to the government, it is also available to any PPP project. Revenue generation, I think there's a continual monitoring of the demand, which has to be done by the MD and the CFO. Now, the next part is really what I'm trying to say is the injecting energy. Injecting energy into the system is, how do you do? Inject energy into the system. You see, today what is happening is, projects get delayed, we look at it in terms of days or weeks. But that doesn't bother us. We say, okay, 2 days delay, 30 days delay, doesn't bother. But suppose you convert this into monetary terms. You convert this into monetary loss, it's a huge impact. Just as we found that $200 billion is a huge, it gives you an impact. So let's convert all these losses into monetary terms. So, and in terms of productivity and in terms of profitability. In project management, we have a concept called earned value method, where it is, we have two parameters called the earned value, which is the budgeted cost of work performed. We have the actual cost of work performed. So we can compute on a time basis the productivity in terms of time, the budgeted cost of work performed divided by the number of days from the LOI times. So here I'm talking the time duration is from the LOI, because a lot of delay which happens from the letter of intent given to the party. I think we must compute the delay from that time. Then the schedule performance index, which is the budgeted cost of work performed divided by the budgeted cost of work schedule. This should be monitored on a day-to-day basis. Then we have the PI cost, which is the ratio of the budgeted cost of work performed and the actual cost of work performed. This again should be updated for every project on a day-to-day basis. Now, the profitability index is really the present value of future cash inflows. You can calculate the profitability index on a day-to-day basis and the average economic loss per day. Now, what is different? This might be being calculated for every project, but what we are only trying to say here is that calculate this from the LOI stage. That means you redefine the total project cost. The total project cost as it's defined today is from the time that the concession agreement is signed. But you calculate the social project cost right from the time the LOI is given. So all the time period, put in by the government will also figure in this. So it is an integrated approach.